Right.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We are Adventium Adventium capstone project, and our job to write a Java program to convert XML data into the PowerPoint slide. My name is Hong Dao.
I'm Colton Burnett.
Ryan Pufall. And I'm Jacob.
Adventium is our company we are working for. So their base is in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they develop a solution for safe and secure software-intensive complex system. And we use the Comet library, which is the short term for corrected access to base model engineering tool library. And the Comet library is the library include the analysis tools used to catch the violation of system level requirements early on in the design and develop of their own software products.
Okay, so for the problem, Adventium's Comet library generates all this XML data, but they don't have any way to present it. And XML data files can generally be pretty long, and manually going through that would be time consuming. And it can also be kind of confusing if you're not very familiar with the XML data, especially with the lists. Okay, then on the right here, we have an example of an XML table. Then this table is 3 columns by 20 rows, and we're only displaying 3 of the rows. So in the code, it's 104 lines, which is pretty long. And it would be pretty time consuming. Okay.
All right, so we are tasked with making a solution to make it a little bit easier for these people to get their reports directly imported into a PowerPoint slide instead of having to run through the XML data themselves and type it all up in the PowerPoint slide. The process is taking in an XML data or file, unmarshalling that data, and then also reading in a PowerPoint template that the users would present, that they want to use to present the data that they have from their program, and then map these elements together to create a brand new copy of a PowerPoint template and output it to wherever they want it to be. The resources we used was the JAXB framework for unmarshalling, Apache POI. GitLab was where we hosted it, and we used Eclipse for all of our programming. This is all Java-based, and obviously our data was PowerPoint type and XML. So the solution really Hung already kind of talked about it, is to help testing for system level requirements. The Comet library is used for testing system level requirements to help these other companies develop their programs so that they can catch any issues early on and not end up spending a ton of money at the end when they realize that their system doesn't work correctly. And then what we're doing is just making it easier for that report, or to see what went wrong early on. So our schedule consisted of 3 sprints. It all started with research for mostly the first 3 weeks and a little bit of more learning how to do development with JAXB and Apache POI. Then we kind of jumped into the report generation in the second 8 weeks or 4 weeks. And in that process, we started with initial design, trying to implement what we've learned from the first 3 weeks in the initial design. And then we kind of just focused on making a PowerPoint presentation, not with the XML data and necessarily, but with the PowerPoint slides, like the templates. In the final sprint, our plan was to completely finish it up with populating a PowerPoint slide from XML data, or PowerPoint presentation from XML data with lists, tables, and strings, so like titles of slides. We ended up only getting an end-to-end implementation with just strings, which is like the titles, but we were able to copy lists and tables over. We just didn't have all the edge cases for it, so we couldn't really include that in the end-to-end implementation because it wouldn't work with all PowerPoint templates and XML data. And I'll show you more of that in the demo. So here we have our user stories. Everything from 15 to 25 was all in the last sprint. We completed 94% of them. So, and here's kind of a little overview before I jump right into the demo is we wanted to, in the final sprint, to combine all three parts. So getting the PowerPoint template, getting the XML file. Then the second part was combining together and then outputting a full presentation for the users. We were able to generate a runnable jar for our end-to-end implementation, and like I said, that's just the strings, like the titles and whatnot, from the XML. So in our so this is how we have it set up, so I can kind of present to you a demo. I created a main method that asks for a user input of an XML file path, a PowerPoint file path, and then the location they want the PowerPoint to be created. And once you enter that final one, then it generates that PowerPoint for you. This is a little example of some data that we were using. You can see there's lists, and we were able to handle some of the nested lists, but that was only for that specific one. That's kind of where the edge cases come in. We don't have those. So if, let's say, we just had a list with a nested list in it, we wouldn't be able to handle that. So that's why we couldn't include it in the end-to-end implementation yet. What a lot of these companies will be doing will not be making main methods. So we made an API method, API and a method that these companies can use to implement into their projects so that they can automatically import that XML data and that PowerPoint template and the location they want it to go without having to run it through a main method and have all these files. So it can take raw XML data instead of just files and runs a little bit faster. So I will give you a little demo of what we have. So I'll show you how it works with the not end-to-end implementation, how we can create lists and tables and also strings. So as you can see, it populated the titles, the list, as this is the same data that I showed you before, the XML data. It's a list with the nested list, and then it created the table there. Now, this was the main goal of the project, was to get all three of these in an end-to-end implementation, and I talked about that. So we are on track and have the methods in place to get into the end-to-end implementation. We just need to have a little bit more time to develop, and that's kind of what we're passing off. This will be our end-to-end implementation. So you can see in our end-to-end implementation, it just gets the title of the report. Those are the basic strings, and then just leaves everything else in the slide to have what the template already had in there. Because, like I said, we need to make sure that there's edge cases being tested before we can include that in the program, the runnable program. So, like I showed you this before a little bit, this is the template that we're using to test it. You have the title and the subtitle, and then your list and sample text and your table. And then that's kind of what we wanted to have at the end. And we do have that, just not with the end-to-end implementation.
All right, so issues and risks. I guess our first issue was just getting the Git repo set up and not overwriting each other, which happened a couple times, as you can see at the end of the risk list. Schedule conflicts, we're all pretty busy. Jake had a job, everyone else had classes, so it was hard to meet, but Monday mornings we were able to do that, and then on the weekends. We had issues with the logger, so the logger was this thing that we were supposed to set up to help Adventium integrate it with their own system later. And when it was pushed initially, not all the files went with it, so when I tried to pull it and then run the project, I couldn't do anything, so we had to revert a couple of versions. And accessing data from the unmarshalling of XML. Didn't really know how to use JAX-B yet when we started this project, so that was kind of hard to learn, but we got through it. Risks, merge conflicts, like I said before. We didn't know if the remote repository would go down or not. It was NDSU servers. And then a lot of edge cases that we probably didn't account for, so in the future, Adventium's going to have to look into those, like if a table doesn't stay on one page, or if it's too big, or maybe there's too many columns for that page, etc. So post-mortem, we were able to access the alt text, which was the IDs that were hidden on the slides, not the ones that were actually in the text. We were able to write and read PowerPoint slides, read XML data, created our end-to-end implementation with the strings, and then we also provided some code for tables and lists, but couldn't finish that. We were unable to get together very often outside of class, a lot of last-minute documentation at the end of the week while we were coding earlier in the week, and then didn't add that code for lists and tables to the end-to-end. And improvements, probably create a standard operating procedure for pulling and pushing, just so we don't have any merge conflicts or anything like that if we were to do this project again. And next steps for Adventium or whoever works on this next, fully implement those lists and tables. We talked about SmartArt early in the semester, so that would be the next step after that. Allow for large tables to be split along multiple slides, so if you have a lot of data on one table, you want to be able to see it instead of having a huge table with tiny little cells. And then more testing for edge cases. Any questions?
I got a couple, but can you go through the Watakama file? You know, what's a typical project that runs one of those?
So really, it's any software that the company would be developing. You'd use the Kamut library to catch any software level errors, essentially. So it's used in place for development as more of like logging, from my understanding.
Like as soon as code is written, you run that, or at what point do you run it?
I guess I don't have 100% any answers for that.
To be fair, we didn't really give you any examples of customer data. Most of our example of data that we
I guess you listed some of the things that need to be finished up. If you were going to finish those, is that another semester's worth? Is it 2 weeks worth? Or do you have a feel for how much it might be?
I feel like it wouldn't be that much time. We definitely started ramping up towards the end of the semester with our development, and it started moving a little bit faster than the rest of the semester. I don't know if that's just we caught our second wind or what, but I think if we, set some more time off for this project, we definitely could finish it in a month or so and make sure it's working correctly. But like he was saying, is we all have obligations outside of class and
No, I
stuff.
was-
So that's the thing that really kind of held us back a little bit.
For listen tables, I think we could get that done in a couple weeks. I don't know how Smart Art would go since we haven't worked that at all.
Yeah.
So it's hard to know exactly.
So, like most Apache libraries, is Apache POI open source as well, or?
I believe so. I mean, we were able to use it.
Yeah, I guess I don't know if they have open source development for it. I didn't look too much into that part, but yeah, it's free to use.
Because for like third-party software, if you're using it, like it should be open source.
Right.
Like, just make sure.
Yeah, that was in part of the requirements. These were recommended dependencies that they do have permissive licenses, which is a requirement.
And Apache POI is for all Microsoft Office. And people mostly use it for Excel. It's just PowerPoint was pretty new for work, at least.
I guess I have one more. Just now that you've gone through the process, do you have any things you would do differently next time to mitigate risks?
I think that what I've learned this semester is consistency is kind of key. So if we were to keep up with doing things daily instead of putting things off to the end of the week or not really planning out our goals based on time schedules, like time frames, I think we would have been better at getting things done on time. Because you know, when you have something set and you say, well, we have to get this done by the end of the sprint. Oh, this week I have all these other assignments for my other classes. You know, maybe doing documentation is easier than doing the other stuff, so I'll just do documentation for now, and we'll do that later, and then you end up waiting. And I think putting set dates, at least for me personally, would probably help me stay on track with things a little bit better.
Probably get all the specifications before starting to work on something. So I remember when we were doing strings and we were talking about multiple IDs in one text box,
Sure.
I didn't start thinking about that until after I'd already finished the string itself. So just knowing what we're going to be doing before starting it.
Sure.
I think the hardest thing about this project was making a random presentation with JAXP or just Apache POI from scratch, kind of what all the tutorials say, and then trying to implement it with data that we're receiving instead of picking the format with Apache POI and typing out every string with Apache POI. We have getting the XML to do it all for you, I think was really difficult, especially because there weren't very many people out there doing it, and then the people that were doing it, I found it kind of funny because they would ask a question on Stack Overflow in 2015 and nobody has responded. But I know there's people out there. I think they're just laughing at the others that don't know how to do it. So yeah, that was a frustrating thing we ran into all the time was we'd always find documentation and examples for Excel, nothing ever for PowerPoint. So yeah, the fundamentals of it, easy. Applying it to what we were doing, not so much.
I hear you.
Thank you.